Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Lowland Greenhouse here at Carlton Carnivores. I've got another plant spotlight for you guys, and this is one that I have discussed one species in this sundew group before, but overall haven't spent a whole lot of time in this group because even for me they have still generally provided quite a challenge to grow. And I've only recently started really having a lot of success with them. That is the tuberous sundews, and this is part of one of the easiest to grow groups, which is that of the peltata complex, the shield leaf sundews. These guys are easy to start from seed, which is unusual among the tuberous sundews in particular, and also a lot more forgiving when it comes to their summer dry periods and such, partly because a lot of them grow in places where they don't have as strict a summer dry season. And in fact, sometimes some forms may even go dormant in winter instead. Now, the species that I have for you guys today is possibly the smallest species in that group, and that is Drosera gracilis. Now you can see, I have to hold it up to the dark shirt here so you can actually see it. It's a relatively small but climbing or erect standing sundew. And again, a tuberous species, so as it grows, it's gathering nutrients to store in a tuber underground within the soil here. Drosera gracilis is a relatively recently recognized species, not recognized by all taxonomists either, because it is very, very similar to the type species of the group, the Drosera peltata. This species tends to grow roughly 6 inches, 15 centimeters tall, give or take, and that is measured up to basically where the leaves stop showing up here and the flower stalk starts. The flower stalk itself might add another 10 centimeters, so roughly 4 inches. So you might get a plant that is between 8 to 10, maybe 11 inches tall altogether once it's fully done flowering and such. But these guys, they grow in the primarily southeast portion of Australia. So they are found in Tasmania as well, but also Victorian, New South Wales, and that general area, as well as a disjunct population that is actually found in Papua New Guinea. Interestingly enough, also there's a disjunct population of Drosera rotundifolia, which is a northern temperate sundew that is also found in the highlands there. How exactly those species got to that particular island, I don't know, but kind of interesting that they have somehow managed to jump thousands of miles to produce new populations in that particular, much more environmentally different area as well. Now again, these guys grow to roughly 6 inches tall. They start out their growing season as a rosette pressed flat to the ground. These long, skinny leaves, they have long, narrow petioles that end in a kind of kidney bean shaped leaf blade, the lamina, and those form a rosette. There's anywhere from between like 5 to 15, 20 leaves that form that rosette, and they start as that, and they may grow as that way for a couple months during their growing season before they extend up into their climbing phase. And as they do this, the leaves actually change shape a bit. They become peltate, hence the peltata complex. So their lamina changes shape from flat to round and skinny, and actually attaches to the middle of the back of the lamina. And the lamina actually forms kind of that classic shield shape. So it's got like a flat top and then round on the bottom. And of course, on the corners of that top are actually longer tentacles that stick out off the leaves too. And then those grow up. This is usually, that takes a few weeks to develop, and then right at the end they form their flower stalk. This species produces primarily white flowers. They're very small, very simple flowers. The sepals very distinctly have these tiny hairs that are covering them. That is one of the diagnostic characteristics of this species as well. I'll talk about that in a minute. But sometimes they will self-pollinate. Oftentimes they will wait, hopefully, for a small insect or something to come by and visit their flowers, take that pollen to another group. But they will often self-pollinate as well, and most species in the peltata complex actually will self-pollinate, unlike a lot of other tuberous sundews, which are often obligate outcrossers. They have to cross with a genetically different plant altogether. Now these guys also sometimes will grow lateral stolons, so underground stems, out from underneath the rosette to form new tubers a couple inches away from the original mother plant. That will then produce a whole new plant in the next growing season after that stolon dies off and the tuber is left on its own. Now these guys, where they grow, tends to be fairly cool in winter, sometimes even freezing over, and then warmer and slightly drier in summer. Now that does kind of alter some of their growing habits. Most of them are still winter growers, like species in southwest Australia where they have the winter wet and then summer extreme dry. But in places where there are extreme freezes, they may actually halt growth in the middle of winter and then grow on either side of that. So they'll freeze that, and then once conditions become more favorable, they start growing again. In places like their tropical population, you may find plants that perhaps may grow year-round or may come in tune with the tropical wet and dry seasons there instead, where they won't be triggered by temperatures, simply by moisture or photoperiod either, since it's 12 hours day to night all year round there. So that means these guys are adapted to a lot of different conditions, so they're a lot more tolerant of perhaps soils are remaining wetter when it's summer and dry and they're generally dormant, or perhaps during winter if there's a light frost that passes through that may not kill them off like some other sundews might be. Instead, they are fairly tolerant of all those different kinds of conditions, and that means they are also a lot more tolerant for cultivation, making them a much easier beginner tuberous sundews to work with. Now this species is, again, very similar to the type species Drosera peltata. Generally, when people talk about Drosera gracilis, their distinctive characteristics is that it is a much smaller plant than most of its relatives. Again, only 6 inches, 10 inches including the flower stalk or so. Most other species may reach 15, 20, 30 inches tall in some cases. But this species tends to stay relatively small, and also it usually has a very distinctive reddish hue to it. If you have plants that are growing in full sun, they may literally turn solid brick red all the way through. These guys, not quite that red, but certainly a lot redder than most of the other relatives that I have that are growing right now, which are only just barely tinted. Now, a lot of those characteristics can also be found in some populations of Drosera peltata or even Drosera auriculata as well, even certain populations of Drosera gunniana, which are a lot of its relatives in that complex. So any one of those traits is not quite enough. In fact, all those traits together might not even be enough to identify this species. Those hairy sepals will identify it compared to the completely glabrous auriculata, and Drosera hookeri is usually, or either hookeri or gunniana. Those two are also very similar, so they're very easily confused, and I often still kind of mix them up sometimes. But the hairy sepals do help to distinguish it, but that is also another trait that is sometimes found in certain populations of peltata. So identifying this species ends up actually coming down to simply the shape of their seeds. Now, most of the species in the peltata complex have these tiny little ovoid seeds. Auriculata is very distinct in that it has these very thin, splinter-like, almost filiform seeds. But this species has similar seeds to the rest, except for on one end of the seed, there's this little curved beak-like protrusion, and that's not seen in any of the other species in the group. And that one trait is what fully distinguishes this from its relative peltata. Now, like most tuberous sundews, even these guys, which are relatively easy to grow compared to the rest, are still relatively uncommon in cultivation. They're not commonly seen because they still require some technical things to be right in order to get them going. Now, you want to start with, like most tuberous sundews, these guys prefer a relatively well-drained substrate. So a very loose substrate, a lot of perlite or sand. In the wild, these guys grow in very coarse sand soils usually, maybe a little muckier than, again, a lot of other tuberous sundews from southwest Australia. So they're a little more tolerant of damper, denser soils, but Generally, if you want to go with like a 3-to-1 perlite or sand and peat mix, so that it is very loose, very open, very airy. If you can afford it and you can manage to get it, I would recommend a heavier amount of sand than going for perlite, because those bigger chunks of perlite, sometimes you can get the tubers lost in the soil with them, whereas with sand, those tubers are going to stand out a lot more if you go searching for them. And you want to keep that soil moist to wet during their cool or growing season. If you start from seeds, which is often where people will get these first, because again, these do produce seeds relatively easily. In fact, my plant might be producing some fairly soon because it is self-pollinated. You simply sow those on the soil in early fall, preferably, so that as temperatures cool down, the seeds recognize that and they'll start to grow in that cooler, moist environment. They'll sprout in late fall to early winter, start growing throughout the winter season. You want to keep them under very bright light. Again, because where most of these populations come from, they are going to be experiencing some extreme photoperiod differences throughout the season. You want to give these guys roughly 8 to 10 hours of sunlight during winter growth season, or if not sunlight, then as bright and artificial light as you can provide, because again, these guys do grow under mostly full sun in the wild, especially like the alpine forms, which are completely exposed in very open, boggy habitats. So these guys need a lot of sun, and you want to feed them fairly heavily as well, because just like other tuberous sundews, they're going to be trying to capture nutrients so that they can form that nice healthy tuber down in the soil, so that when summer comes and things start to dry out, things warm up and they go dormant, they have that tuber ready to survive throughout the summer season. So they will grow. You want to feed them fairly regularly. Max C or other appropriate fertilizers, fruit flies, dried bloodworms, so on. Catching small gnats and insects around the house if you want to, is what you want to do to feed these guys. If they do flower, if you have more than one plant that has come up from seed, crossing them will produce healthier, more vigorous seeds, but again, they will also self-pollinate. You can also help them along. If you catch the flowers open, you can take a toothpick in there and just kind of tickle the structures around, and that will move pollen around. Or take pollen from one plant and put it onto another if you have multiples, and they'll produce seeds. You can save those in the fridge until the next season, sow them just before fall starts up, and start that again. But of course, hopefully you'll have fed these guys enough for them to have developed good tubers, and maybe even some daughter tubers off of those lateral stolons. And then once they go dormant, you do want to let the pot dry out. Maybe not completely, spritz it a little bit every couple of weeks so that the soil stays just a little moist down in the base of the pot here, so that the tubers don't desiccate in there. And you want to keep temperatures warm or bring the photoperiod up. That will all help trigger the plant till its dormancy time. And then of course come fall, again, start bringing up moisture, decreasing the photoperiod so that these guys are ready for the next season. Now, if you happen to have the tropical form, which is still quite rare in cultivation, I have only just started some seedlings of that. Things may be a little different. They'll probably respond more to actual levels of moisture than they will photoperiod changes, but a little bit of photoperiod change may still have the same triggers. But again, this is quite an easier species. If you keep it a little bit too wet during summer, it's probably going to be a lot more forgiving for you. The tubers are more likely to survive staying moist than other tuberous species will, so you're a lot more likely to see them come back even if you kept it too wet over summer. But an easy way to do this, if you were growing on the tray system, simply take the pot out of the tray, and again, spritz it every couple of weeks just so there's a little bit of moisture in there, and that should keep it good. Now, this species, again, still fairly uncommon in cultivation. You may occasionally see it from big box nurseries. If you're members of seed banks like the ICPS seed bank, you may occasionally see seeds available from there. Or you may be able to contact private growers in some places who may be producing these. But if you get a hold of it, again, one of the better ones to start out with if you're trying to get into tuberous sundews. Now that is about all that I have for that species. Certainly if there's something that I've missed or if you have questions, make sure to leave them in the comments below the video here. If you enjoy educational videos like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything coming up. I will have more plant videos coming up soon, and also The wildlife videos have started up again for this year, so those will be interspersed between each other. If you enjoy educational stuff like this, you'd like to learn more, you can visit my website at carltoncarnivores.com. I have databases there for all the plants and animals that I work with, the things that I'm really interested in. I put up files. The blog is also there that I occasionally put up articles in. If you'd like to see more blog articles, just let me know as well. That does sometimes slip my mind as I'm busy with a lot of the videos here and working with. If you'd like to help support these endeavors, I do sell plants on my website as well. Or you can also become a supporter at Patreon, where members do get early access to the videos, access to the monthly seed contests that I do, and so on. Or you can donate at Ko-fi or simply contact me for other means. If you'd like to see more photos, videos, and tidbits and such, I'm always posting on social media, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook right now at Carlton Carnivores. But until next time, I'm Hawken Carlton, and this is Carlton Carnivores.